Hey there, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second segment of our True Talk Thursday podcast. Now, before we do turn to Dr. Maria Armstrong and Dr. Atiba-Weza, I want to remind you all, if you like what you hear and want to learn more about other issues within education, then please feel free to subscribe below or tune in next week, Thursday at 7 p.m. We thank you for joining us.
So, we were just talking about the principal experience and the stories, how they're so similar from principal to superintendent. And we were talking about the perspective of male, female, Latina, Latino, black, white, and all of that. And how, you're perceived, how do you tread lightly, but yet, don't let people step all over you. When you're shoulder to shoulder with your colleagues of the same, job. And so I guess the question where we left off was, do you find that it changes whether you're moving up the rungs to the superintendency or as a principal? Does it change when you are in like communities of, if they're Latino, Latina communities, or is there a different still perception of someone who is female and Latina as a leader?
That is a good question. So I think, it varies, and I think it varies. And when you're in your like communities, and what I'll share is one of the stories from one of my participants that, and that's when ourselves. So even with our own community, we're perceived a certain way too. No se va a creer mucho, no te vas a creer mucho. Mira, ya se cree mucha.
That's right.
So one was, and she was a female, and she was going into the interview, and she realized that it was a all Latino board member. She was like, I don't know, this might be problematic. And so she knew that, and she was worried about that going into the interview. And then she ended up getting the job, and then she was surprised that she was able to have a good relationship with all the board members. But knowing that sometimes it is problematic, if you're too assertive as a Latina with a Latino, then you can, you still have, and we'll say machismo is, there's still that, but it depends on the culture that they were brought up with. So, and then once again, like you shared earlier about, if you're in a different community and you're not sitting in your principal's office and you're out with the front office staff, and you have a parent come in and they don't know that you're the principal, it's like, hello, can you help me find a principal? It's like, yeah, I'm the principal. So they automatically assume, well, oh, you're the principal? Oh, and the same thing. And one of the things that I want to look at is the Latina in the Latina in the superintendent's office, because they're like, oh, they're surprised that there's a Latina in that office. Because there's another book that as I was going up my doctoral studies, the man in the principal's office. So that brought me to the Latina in the superintendent's office, because you don't imagine that it's going to be a Latina in the office. So yeah, it's those, I think still those biases that are out there, gender, ethnicity, and I'll share currently, and it exists in higher ed, some of my personal experiences. I'll walk into the room in the office, and in a Zoom meeting, well, hi, Sonia, and the male next to me, well, hi, Dr. So-and-so. I was like, and then I was like, he doesn't even have a doctorate. He's the assistant.
I thought that only happened to me.
No, it happened. It happens quite a bit, and I have actually thought of writing about that, because I don't have a common or popular or regularly known name. So folks have come to my office, my name is on the wall, and in 3 of the 4 districts where I've worked as a superintendent, my assistants have been white. And invariably to return to the white guy, pleased to meet you, Mr. Superintendent. And I'm like, one day I was actually sitting on my desk with my jacket off. My assistant was sitting on the side chair, but yet this gentleman walked in, turned from the desk and went and shook the white man's hands and said, pleased to meet you, Mr. Superintendent. And he said, I'm not the superintendent, he is. And the look on his face, I was like, the implicit racism is such that it's stupid, because some of the things is like, you know, as a principal, I had I was what you call an itinerant principal. I had programs in 3 different campuses, and this was in a vocational district, you know, and I had reserved parking. And it's not because I'm big on reserve parking, I park anywhere, but the nature of my job, I had to, at a moment's notice, get to another campus and move around. And this was in, out on Long Island in Dick Sills, which is a white, upper class, upper middle class community. And this woman parked, as she was pulling in, I was pulling in, and she felt she was trying to get in there before me. And I said, excuse me, ma'am, it says reserve. I pay taxes here. She slammed her door and she walked away. I said, ma'am, gotta move your car, you know? And she just kept on going. So I just parked my car, and it was coming close to 3 o'clock, and you're not supposed, there's no traffic in and out at 3 because the buses are coming, and the campus is closed to vehicular traffic. So she got blocked in. She went in huffing and puffing, and I need to see the person in charge. So the secretary said, he's in charge, and pointed to me. She just, I was just laughing. I mean, I had a straight face, but I went into my office and I was just laughing. She was like, he's in charge. So she wanted to report me, you know? So it happens quite so often, you know, but it was humorous, but on a serious note, it happens quite so often because it means that you're not accepted for who you are and what you do, but also the children whom we serve, you know, if they're dealing with you like that, imagine how to deal with the children. And oftentimes, if you're in a big district, even staff would sometimes try to, you know, that microaggression where they try to not see you for who you are.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like your title means nothing to them because you have a certain spelling of your name or certain complexion. And you have to say to the principals and to the staff and to the members of the board, if these people work for us and they're treating adults like that, how do they treat children? When there are no adults around, even if there are adults around. So I think it's important, and I always look at it, while sometimes you can be angry, I look at it beyond the individual superintendent, but what it really means for our field as educators to be subjected to that. And as you said, your colleagues, where they would call you Sonia and call the white guy doctor or professor or everything but, you know. So I think, and I am unwavering and unapologetic. I do not let folks off the hook. As Malcolm X said, racism is the worst ism of all the isms. So when you do that, I let you know, you're out of line. And, you know, as I said, Maria, maybe we ought to write that book, because I was cutting my lawn and a woman asked me can I have your card? You know? I said, oh, yes, you can have my card. So I walked in the back of my house, came in, I got my card, and they said, oh, I didn't know you were the superintendent of schools. I'm so sorry. I thought you were just cutting the grass. Yes, I'm just cutting the grass, but it's my grass. So I think, and when you sometimes tell that to your white colleagues, they think you're too sensitive.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a clue. They're not subjected to it, and they're not in your skin. Oh, come on, that's nothing. You're too sensitive. No, it's not too sensitive, but you know.
And you know, we laugh about it, right? We laugh about it now, but I'll tell you, you know, what you're talking about, Atiba, is exactly what I was reading in the book. Topics about parking, about how we dress. You know, I even to this day, you know, people would always comment, because I'm a hoop girl. Yo soy chicana pura, in and out, right? So my hoops, I've been wearing them since I was, I don't know, 8. And that's just who I am. And people will definitely judge. And the stories that you mentioned that others have shared, you know, about where you park, I've been called, hey, are you the campus supervisor? And I'm like, I've never seen a campus supervisor wear a suit to work, honey. And I wear my stilettos too. I am not a campus supervisor, and being the principal of a school. So, I mean, we all have those stories. What was, I think, probably more eye-opening to me, I guess, is the fact that we finally have, we've had data. We know that it's been slow coming, but how do we move that dial now? It's like, okay, I know that, you mentioned the data for how many female superintendents, let alone Latina superintendents in the state of Texas, where just like in California, we have the abundance of children who look like us, yet we have such small numbers. I mean, not even, it's like below disproportionate, if there ever is such a word, right? Because disproportionate to me is kind of, it's just unbalanced. No, the gap is huge. It is real and it is huge. So how do we start to turn the dial on that where, as a higher ed person, as a professor, how do we create a new way of looking at, from the classroom graduate to go into the education field where, you're always being told, you got to go out there, make some money, honey, make that money. And then you hear these stories about, oh, well, you're not going to want to go into education after all the student loans that you're going to have to take out, because most of us have to work while we go to school, all of that. And so they say, go for a better paying job. And they don't, we don't maneuver when in fact, you can make a decent and if not a very good living, more than any of our, parents or other folks in our, of our family have ever made. And so how do we turn that conversation to one where it is revered first and foremost? Because we know as a culture, we revere education. We've always been taught los maestros, we believe them before we believe our kids. Those kinds of things. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just, that's how it was. What ideas do you have on turning the perception of the profession around?
And those are good questions. And I'm glad that you brought in California, because I started doing some preliminary data collection on California Latina superintendents. So I have my numbers here. So out of 948 superintendents in California, the female gap is less than it is in Texas. So white women are doing a little bit better in California than other states. There's 397 female, but only 17 are Latina. And then once again, it's the same distinct patterns on where they're being located. And although the differences between Texas and California is, in Texas, they were all in one little cluster. In California, they're spread out in the smaller rural districts with your 90+% Hispanic population, making less, high SES. So it is disproportionate when the student enrollment is already majority Hispanic. So there's a huge gap. So, how do we encourage? Because we still have, our teachers aren't Latino yet, Latina, they're not Latinx. So we need to create that pathway, that pipeline, Latina pipeline to education. And you hit it right on the ground, because education in the Hispanic community, Mexican-American community, Chicano community, and those that migrate to come get a better education, that's why they come. That's why they migrate, because they want a better education. They honor education for their children, and they're respectful of the classroom teacher. It's like maestra knows. It's like, and we said, it's like, and those who are Catholic, you have your priest, and then you have the teacher, and that's how the hierarchy is, and the respect. But we got to change policy. We need legislature to change policy and provide pathways for our high school students to seek and become classroom teachers. And then when they become classroom teachers, we need role models. We need principals who start seeing our classroom teachers as potential leaders. those Latinos, Latinas, you are a potential leader. So they need mentoring, they need coaching, they need sponsorship. We need to move you to the pathway of the principalship. Many of them don't see themselves as a campus leader yet, so we need to encourage them. And then we need those Latinas that become principals. Now you can seek the superintendency. It's like, have you thought about it? So just start plugging those ideas that you can do this. See yourself as that leader. And then once again, policy change. Let's give them the respect and honor education. And especially when you're in those schools where you have high need kids. And it's like Atiba said, we as leaders, and that's what comes out in the studies, the reason women, the Latinas, do what they do, it's about they have a passion and they are determined to make a better life for all kids, not just one kid, all kids. They have that passion. And that passion normally comes from they experienced oppression, their parents experienced oppression. So now they want to defeat that oppression. So they have a true passion and they persevere. And they've learned how to become more assertive in how they do what they do, because they are advocating for the students. So and I know I'm probably going in a tangent, but that's how we talk. We talk in stories, we go in circles.
Well, so, and I've always shared that too with folks. It's like, people always want to look at how we think, how we write, how we speak as a deficit, because we don't often think, speak, or communicate in a linear fashion, right? And so I say that's because we're very floral. Things, when we talk organic, we know what we're talking about. We are from the land. And so we see things firsthand. They start out this way and they grow into different areas that we have no concept of sometimes. And so that's how our brains work. That's human. It's not because we have a different brain. That's because we're collective. That's because we think of family. But people will literally question that. Like, oh, really? That's how you think? Well, why do you think that way? I'm like, really? Why do you think that way?
When we get back from our break, I will talk about that, because I too have some ideas about that language stuff, but also getting people into the field.
Yay! Quick break.
Hey there, and don't forget, if you like what you hear and want to gain some more insight into what school districts are facing now, then tune in every Thursday at 7 p.m. or subscribe below. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great night.